Today we have a new look at some concept art for Ahsoka, which unveils a different angle of the finale. It really is impressive. We're gonna get to that in just a moment, but we're gonna start today's video with some speculation. A question for you guys in the comments down below. Is it time for Star Wars to return to its conventional titling system? Instead of naming shows and movies after one character, should they go back to Star Wars titles that are more encompassing? For many, it's become a meme at this point, that Star Wars shows, which are named after one character, often go off in a different direction and focus on others. We've seen this for Andor, which didn't just focus on Cassian but also Mon Mothma, Luthen, and fans at the time said, well, why didn't they just call it Star Wars The Rebellion, or something more encompassing and reflective of the themes of the show? For the Book of Boba Fett, we saw something similar, where after episode 4, they focused much more on Din Djarin and Grogu. And for the Ahsoka series, many argue the so-called main character was not the focus of her own show in the second half of the season. At times there was just as much focus, if not more, on the likes of characters such as Sabine Wren. Well, here is an interesting spin. Ahsoka repeated the Book of Boba Fett's most controversial decision, but this time, everybody loved it. Now, when discussing this, we do have to be careful because no two shows are the same. They're not structured in the same way, and what they attempt to achieve in their plot, in their place in the timeline, is going to be very different show to show. Ahsoka Season 1 was, for all intents and purposes, Star Wars Rebels Season 5. It went beyond the scope of just Rosario Dawson's character, and focused on Thrawn, Morgan Elsbeth, Baylan, Shin, Ezra Bridger, and Sabine. Now, normally we could say, well, of course it's going to. Shows do not just have one character. But fans who posit this argument are claiming Sabine was in the spotlight more than the titular character herself. With focus on her rise as a Jedi, her story arc in many ways was more satisfying than Ahsoka herself. And for me, while I love the character of Ahsoka, others such as Baylan, Hera, Shin, and Sabine were more interesting in the show. But I think the reason it worked is that the core of the story of Ahsoka Season 1 was the search for their friend Ezra, and Sabine Wren was a big part of that. Baylan defeated Ahsoka on Cetos, Sabine got to Peridea with the villains first. There was a good, concrete plot reason we didn't see Ahsoka as much for a little while, but it came together very well in the end. And if you contrast this to the Book of Boba Fett, after episode 4, in an unprecedented and sudden manner, all of a sudden we're focusing on Din and Grogu. And instead of what a lot of fans expected, some breathing room between the two characters, maybe for a season or two, they reunited straight away in the next show after Mando Season 2, which was Book of Boba. So is it time for a change? Well, I think we're getting one in the form of Dave Filoni's movie, which is all-encompassing of these individual shows and stories. But what do you think? Let me know down below. On the subject of Boba Fett, rewatching Mando Season 2, I noticed a very interesting line in Chapter 14, which foreshadows Fett's involvement in Dave Filoni's upcoming film, and what's been established in the recent shows. The final act of the episode of Mando 2 called The Tragedy has set this up perfectly. Boba Fett in Slave 1, after Grogu was taken by Dark Troopers, flies towards the Imperial cruiser before remarking, quote, "They're back. The Empire, they're back," indicating the former bounty hunter's shock at the resurgence of the Empire he once worked for as a bounty hunter. Having survived the Sarlacc pit, Boba has a new outlook on life. No longer a bounty hunter and instead a crime lord, he is still troubled by his time working for Vader and others during the time of the Empire. But given his line, acknowledging remnants of the Empire have returned, he should be part of the fight against the threat of the Shadow Council. Lucasfilm should not forget about him now that Thrawn's returned. The more Boba we get, the better. I think it's fair to say it would be a very fun meeting if and when Thrawn meets Boba Fett, because in the same way Thrawn has a petty side when he talks to Ahsoka, in Star Wars Rebels he taunted Hera Syndulla about her family, Ezra about Sabine. He knows how to get under people's skin, how to impassion them with rage and throw them off. I imagine he would do this to Boba by jibing at him for being a clone. As a Boba Fett fan and a fan of the New Republic era, I would love to see this happen. And so now, my dear friends, on to some of this art. We begin with an ethereal look of Peridea, the Great's mothers, and here we have Sabine, but in the concept art she is wearing her helmet. Next up we have the Purgle, but the two bits of art which are super impressive for me are the ones on Corellia, because it looks so much more vibrant than in Solo: A Star Wars Story, or indeed in the show itself. Here is the one of the ghost arriving, and then we have the T6. Instead of grey skies, it's a sunny day. Then we have Lothal, reminiscent of Star Wars Rebels, but the one we really need to break down are the statues on the side of the mountain on Peridea, where Balin is walking on the Father's hand, and the Father is pointing to that beacon of light, extremely similar to the monastery on Mortis. Maybe the temple on Peridea is an access point to getting to Mortis, which itself was outside of known space and time. Now, this very impressive piece of concept art debunks a popular theory. After the episode aired, some fans said, what if it's not the Father in this statue, but Balin himself? We don't know if Balin wants to become the Father, or maybe the Son. I agree that Anakin now occupies the place of the Father, foreshadowed in the Clone Wars Season 3. But this version, in the piece of concept art, is absolutely the Father. Peridea is inherently linked to the Mortis gods. And as is shown in Part 8, we see Balin on the hand, but the light that the Father is pointing to is key to all of it. Don't worry, I'm not going to repeat my Abeloth theories, but I do suspect a revival of the Mother has something to do with it. And so now, my dear friends, now that Ahsoka's come to an end, I would like to do a ranking of all the live-action shows. So I've seen a few people do this. A tier list for the best Disney Plus series. We've had 3 of Mando, 1 of Boba Fett, 1 of Andor, 1 of Kenobi, and 1 of Ahsoka most recently. So, as you can see, S tier, right here at the top, is the best, the creme de la creme. A is great, B good, C okay, D not good, F is scruffy looking nerf herder. I'm so glad they sorted these by seasons, because there are some shows where I like the first season or the second season, not so much the third. Let's get into it. For S tier, I've got to give that to Andor. Tony Gilroy gave us a fantastic anti-imperial, pro-rebellion, gets to the heart of Star Wars show. Some fans say it just didn't feel like Star Wars because it didn't have the fantasy and the lightsabers. I disagree. I mean, sure, it doesn't have Jedi or Sith, but it gets to the heart of George Lucas's message of rebellion and the little guy standing up to authoritarianism. I know it's not the same flavour as something like Ahsoka or Mando, but that's the beauty of multiple shows on this platform on Disney+. You can pick and choose what is for you and what's not. Andor for me was one of the best, if not the best. Now joining Andor right at the top, The Mandalorian Season 1, a beautiful show, and the first season was so pure, world building, themes of found family, unlikely people who end up becoming family, a bounty hunter, and a 50-year-old child, Grogu. And of course the mission set by the Armourer at the end of the season to return Grogu to his own kind, the Jedi. And that is why I thought Season 2 also deserves to go right at the top. The whole arc between 1 and 2 is the reason some fans say maybe that's where it should have ended, because there is definitely a drop in quality in the 3rd season, and while I do like it, I'm not as into it as the first 16 chapters, which is why I'm unfortunately going to have to drop Mando Season 3 to a B. It does have its redeeming moments and episodes. I'm afraid I cannot put it in A or S. So next up, Book of Boba. There's a charm to it. This has become something of a cult classic, I guess, and its imperfections kind of make it quirky. So Boba's going in B. I do enjoy it. Not perfect, but good. Obi-Wan Kenobi, for me, was a C. Again, some good moments, a very strong finale with emotion. So often when I'm thinking about top 10 Star Wars moments, I think of Obi-Wan's dialogue to Anakin when he slices his helmet in half and he says, "I'm sorry, Anakin, for all of it." Ewan McGregor and Hayden Christensen are fantastic in that show, but I'm so frustrated with some creative choices made, which I don't think flow with Revenge of the Sith and A New Hope, and this show sits in the middle of those, so I'm going to put it in C. I might bump it up to a B, but this at the moment is where it's going to sit. And as Star Wars fans, our rankings for the shows and the movies, they do change. They're not just always set in stone. It's almost like a mood thing. So next up, and finally for the live action shows, Ahsoka Season 1, I'm going to put it in A as great. I really enjoyed it. The finale was rather predictable, but it was a great start, and teases what is to come. So those are my live action rankings. In S we have Andor, Mando Season 1, Mando Season 2, in greats we have Ahsoka, B, Book of Boba Fett, Mando Season 3, and Obi-Wan Kenobi, which is okay. It's not like it's a negative. I didn't put it in not good or scruffy looking nerf herder. I also think about the way the shows come about, the context, they're not all one genre. And those considerations are ones I drew upon when deciding where do I place these. And so now guys, on to the animated shows, broken up by season, and we're gonna start with the Clone Wars. You know what, I'm gonna do Clone Wars movie before the series itself as the only kind of film in this list. So the Clone Wars movie is a C for me. It was decent, but it does not compare to the 7 seasons of the animated 3D show that followed. So season 1 of Clone Wars was good, I'm gonna put it in B. Clone Wars season 2 I would say is great, I much preferred it to the debut season. Season 3 is also in the great category. I think the Mortis arc in that season is one of the best storylines in Star Wars history. It also continues George's vision for Anakin as the Chosen One, and that is where Ahsoka really starts to grow, in my opinion, as a character. Season 4 of the Clone Wars is a dramatic one. I think of Pon Krell and the Umbara story arc. So for me, again, that's going to go in great. I think season 5 delivered some heartbreak and more Mandalorians, so that for me is going in A. I'm putting season 6 in S tier. Oh, getting spicy. I've got a soft spot for season 6. The sacrifice episode, not only the episode with Yoda and the Wills, but also the clone development with Tup and the conspiracy. I really think season 6 is underrated. A lot of fans praise season 7 being the best, but I prefer 6, although season 7 is a masterpiece. So that's got to go in S tier as well, in the best category. We're going to move on to the Bad Batch. Season 1, I have no notes. I'm putting it in... Should I put in best or great? I'm going to put it in best. Bad Batch season 1 was incredibly written. Season 2, I'm going to put in great. I was tempted to put it in good, but then I realised, even though it didn't reach the heights of season 1 for me, it still had some of the best animated Star Wars content. So now we move on to Star Wars Visions. I'm going to put it in good. I liked some of it. I appreciate the diversity of animated styles, taking risks with what you call Star Wars. So I'm going to say seasons 1 and 2 qualify in good. So now we move on to Star Wars Rebels. So we start with season 1. I'm going to put it in good. Now bear in mind, this is my favourite animated show, but it really doesn't pick up until season 2, which for me is S tier. I think I'm going to say the same thing about seasons 3 and 4. I enjoy every moment of this show, all 4 seasons. Resistance season 1 is okay, season 2 is also okay. I'm tempted with some of those episodes to put it in good, but I just don't think it's my cup of tea. So this was just a TV show video. Let me know if you want to see me do the movies. My S tier is Andor, Mando 1 and 2, Clone Wars 6 and 7, Bad Batch 1, Rebels 2, 3 and 4. What are your thoughts? Let me know in the comments down below. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to give me a big fat thumbs up, subscribe if you're new, and I'll see you in the next one. May the Force be with you, always.